My daughter Sophia was my everything. When she passed away, it felt like the world lost its color. I'm James Sullivan, a 67-year-old father who gave my all to raise her after my wife passed. Sophia built a biotech empire from a spark of an idea, and I was there from the beginning, mortgaging my house, pouring my life savings into her dream. That company, worth $60 million when she died, was her legacy, a testament to her brilliance. But her husband, Ethan Brooks, had other ideas. The day after we buried her, he inherited everything, and the first thing he did was kick me out of the home Sophia and I designed together. He stared at me, his voice sharp with contempt, and said, "Find a street corner to live on, old man. You don't belong here." I picked up my old leather suitcase, walked out into the rain, and made one phone call. 5 days later, Ethan was on his knees, begging me for help. He should have listened more carefully when Sophia's will was read. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Drop it in the comments below. And if you believe patience can outsmart arrogance, give this video a like and hit that subscribe button. Your stories mean the world to me. The day after Sophia's funeral, the silence in her house was crushing. It wasn't the quiet of shared grief, but a cold, sharp stillness, like the air before a storm breaks. I sat in the old armchair in the living room, the one Sophia and I picked out when we moved in. Every inch of that house held her memory. The hardwood floors we laid together, the soft hum of the lab equipment in the basement where she worked late into the night, building her company from nothing. I could still hear her laugh, see her smile as she talked about curing diseases, making the world better. Then I heard the sharp click of boots on the stairs. Ethan came down, not in morning black, but in a sleek, tailored suit that screamed money. His face was a mask of cool confidence, no trace of sorrow. He didn't even glance at me as he strode past, his cologne sharp and expensive, talking loudly on his phone. "We need to move fast," he said, his voice clipped. "Liquidate the non-core assets by next month. The past is gone. Let's focus on the future." I sat there, feeling like a piece of furniture he hadn't decided whether to keep or toss out. That's when I knew the storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. That house wasn't just a house. It was a piece of my heart, built with Sophia over years of sweat and dreams. I can still see her at 20, her eyes bright with ideas, sketching out plans for a biotech company that could change lives. She'd sit at our old kitchen table, papers everywhere, talking about cures for diseases most folks couldn't pronounce. I was just a high school science teacher then, scraping by after my wife passed, but I believed in her. When she needed funds to start her company, I didn't hesitate. I mortgaged our little home, the one I'd raised her in, and handed her every penny of my savings. "Dad, this is a huge risk," she'd said, her voice trembling. I just smiled and pushed the check into her hands. "It's not a risk, sweetheart," I told her. "It's an investment in you." Those early days were magic. Sophia and I spent countless nights in the basement of that house, turning it into a makeshift lab. We'd haul in equipment, laugh over spilled coffee, and argue about the best way to test her theories. That lab became the heart of her company, where she developed breakthroughs that saved lives and built a fortune. The house grew with her success, a sprawling place we designed together, with big windows to let in the morning light, and that basement lab, always humming with possibility. Every beaker, every microscope, every late-night experiment was a piece of her soul. It was our sanctuary, a place where her dreams and my pride in her lived side by side. But that day after her funeral, the house felt like a stranger. Ethan's presence was a cold wind blowing through it. He didn't see the memories in the hardwood floors we'd laid or the lab we'd built. To him, it was just real estate, a line item to be sold off. While I sat in that armchair, lost in grief, he came down the stairs like he owned the world. No black suit, no sign of mourning, just a crisp, navy blue vest that probably cost more than my old car. His phone was glued to his ear, his voice sharp as a blade. "We need to streamline the portfolio," he said, pacing the living room. The lab equipment's outdated. Sell it. The house needs a modern edge, something sleek. The past is holding us back. He didn't even look at me, as if I were a ghost haunting his new empire. I watched him, my chest tight with a mix of sorrow and dread. Sophia had loved him once, I knew that. She saw something in him, a spark maybe before success turned him cold. But this Ethan, this man striding through her home like a conqueror, was a stranger to her dreams. I remembered a moment years ago when Sophia's company was just taking off. We were in the lab, calibrating a new machine, and she looked at me, worry creasing her brow. "Dad," she said softly, "Ethan's changing. The money, the deals, it's all he talks about now. I need to make sure you're protected no matter what." I'd brushed it off, told her not to worry. But sitting there, watching Ethan dismiss everything we'd built, I wondered if she'd seen this day coming. He moved through the house like an inspector, not a husband. He stopped at a wall of photos, Sophia as a kid, grinning with a science fair ribbon. Us on a camping trip, her face smudged with marshmallow. Me teaching her how to use a microscope. "These have to go," he said to no one in particular, his voice flat. "Clutter. We need clean lines, modern vibes." Then he turned to the lab's entrance, his eyes narrowing. That old equipment's gotta be worth something. And the space, perfect for a home theater or a bar. My heart sank. That lab wasn't just equipment. It was Sophia's legacy, her life's work. But to Ethan, it was just another asset to flip. He picked up his phone again, his voice louder now, almost gleeful. "It's all mine," he said, glancing at me for the first time, a smirk curling his lips. 60 million, full control. No strings attached. That look in his eyes, it wasn't just triumph. It was a challenge, a dare for me to argue. I didn't, not then. But something in me shifted. A quiet certainty settling in my bones. This wasn't the end. Sophia had built more than a company. She'd built a promise, one I knew she'd never break. And Ethan? He was about to learn just how wrong he was. The day after Ethan's phone call, we sat in the sleek, mahogany-paneled office of Sophia's lawyer, Laura Bennett. The air smelled of polished wood and old documents, heavy with the weight of what was coming. Laura had known Sophia since she was a kid, back when her big ideas were just doodles in a notebook. She'd been there when Sophia's company was nothing more than a dream, advising her through every step. Now Laura sat across from us, her face tight with something like sorrow, adjusting her glasses before she began. Ethan sat opposite me, his posture rigid, hands folded like a man about to close a business deal. He wasn't a grieving widower. He looked like a shark smelling blood. Laura started reading Sophia's will, her voice steady but heavy. The words washed over me, dense with legal jargon, but the heart of it was brutally clear. Sophia's company, her investments, the cars, the art, the house we'd built together. Everything, valued at over $60 million, went to her beloved husband, Ethan Brooks. My name came up just once, in a single cold line. To my father, James Sullivan, I leave my deepest gratitude for being my rock and my greatest teacher. Gratitude. That was all. It wasn't about the money. I'd never cared about that. It was the erasure, the feeling that my place in Sophia's life had been reduced to a footnote. I glanced at Ethan. His lips twitched, just a hint of a smile, like he'd won a game I didn't even know we were playing. In that moment, I wasn't a father mourning his daughter. I was an obstacle he'd just cleared. I closed my eyes, and a memory hit me, sharp and vivid like it was yesterday. Sophia and I were in a diner, maybe 15 years ago, her laptop open between us, papers scattered across the sticky table. She was nervous, pitching her biotech idea to investors the next day. I just signed over the deed to my house, handing her a check for every cent I had. "Dad, what if this fails?" she'd asked, her voice small. I'd leaned across the table, looked her in the eye. "It won't fail," I said. because you won't let it." That was the moment her dream became ours. Now, sitting in Laura's office, watching Ethan's smug satisfaction, I felt that moment slipping away, like it had never happened. Back at the house, Ethan dropped any pretense of civility. He moved through the rooms like a landlord sizing up a property, his eyes cold and calculating. He stopped at the wall of photos. Sophia at her first science fair, us fishing by the lake, her graduation day, her smile lighting up the frame. "This is all clutter," he said, his voice flat, like he was talking about junk in a garage. "We need a clean slate, something modern." He turned to the lab's entrance, the heart of Sophia's work, and waved a hand. "That old equipment's gotta go. I'm thinking a game room, maybe a bar, something with class." I felt my chest tighten, like I couldn't breathe. That lab wasn't just equipment. It was where Sophia's genius came to life, where she'd spent nights perfecting formulas that saved people. But to Ethan, it was deadweight. He picked up his phone, his voice booming with new authority. "It's confirmed," he said, a laugh in his tone. $60 million, plus the property. I'm in charge now." He looked at me as he said it, his eyes daring me to challenge him. I didn't, not yet. But I knew this wasn't just about money. It was about wiping out everything Sophia and I had built. I retreated to the lab, the one place in the house that still felt like hers. The shelves held her old notebooks, filled with her neat handwriting, her sketches of molecules and dreams. I ran my fingers over a microscope we'd bought together, its metal cool under my touch. This was her sanctuary, our sanctuary. I was straightening a stack of her notes when the lab door flew open with a bang. Ethan stood there, flanked by two men in dark jackets, their faces blank but their presence heavy, like hired muscle. He was dressed in a crisp polo shirt, his hair slicked back, looking every bit the man in control. "James," he said, his voice sharp, like a blade cutting through the air. "This room's done. Get this junk out by tomorrow. I've got contractors coming to turn it into something useful." I set the notebook down, my hand steady despite the ache in my chest. "Ethan," I said softly, "this isn't junk. This is Sophia's work, her heart. This lab is the soul of this house." I looked at the men behind him, hoping for a flicker of understanding, but they avoided my eyes. Ethan laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Heart, soul? You can't cash those in, old man." His face twisted, the mask of charm gone, revealing something raw and cruel. "I'm sick of you lingering here, touching her things, acting like you still matter. This is my house now, my life. You're done." His voice rose, echoing off the lab's walls. "Get out. Find a street corner to live on for all I care." He nodded to the men, who stepped forward, each grabbing one of my arms. Their grips were firm, mechanical, like they were moving a piece of furniture. I didn't fight. I let them lead me out, my feet catching on the rug. The lab door slammed shut behind me, the lock clicking with a finality that felt like a door closing on my life. They marched me to the front door, and there on the lawn sat my old suitcase, tossed out like trash. The rain started to fall, cold and steady as the front door locked behind me. I stood there, the house I'd built with Sophia looming dark and silent, and I knew something had to give. The rain soaked through my coat as I stood on the lawn, my old suitcase sagging beside me. The house I'd built with Sophia stood dark and silent, its windows like eyes that no longer recognized me. I could still see the lab through the basement window, its faint glow a reminder of her late-night experiments, her dreams etched into every piece of equipment. Ethan's words echoed in my head, "Find a street corner to live on," and they burned, not with anger, but with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. I wasn't done, not yet. I picked up my suitcase, its leather worn but solid in my hand, and walked down the driveway, the rain a steady drumbeat against my shoulders. I didn't look back. I had one move to make, one call to place. I ended up at a rundown motel off the highway, the kind of place where the neon sign flickered and the air smelled of stale coffee and regret. The clerk handed me a key to a ground floor room, its carpet faded, the bed creaking under a thin blanket. I set my suitcase on the rickety luggage rack and sat on the edge of the bed, the springs groaning like they felt my weight. The room was small, the walls stained with time, a far cry from the home Sophia and I had poured our hearts into. But in that moment, the silence wasn't defeat. It was space to think, to plan. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket, its screen glowing in the dim light. My thumb scrolled past names of friends I wasn't ready to face, their pity too heavy to bear. I stopped on one name, Laura Bennett. Laura had been Sophia's lawyer for years, a steady presence through the company's rise. I pressed the call button, my heart steady but heavy, like I was reaching for a lifeline. The phone rang twice, each ring stretching like a lifetime. When Laura answered, her voice was warm but tired, like she'd been carrying a burden of her own. "James," she said, a note of concern breaking through. "I was just about to call you." "Are you okay?" Her words caught me off guard, a spark in the darkness. She was expecting something. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice even, like I was back in my classroom, explaining a complex idea to my students. "Laura, I'm at the Sunset Motel off the interstate. Ethan threw me out of the house. He made it clear I'm not welcome." There was a long silence on the other end, not of shock, but of something heavier, like confirmation of a truth she'd dreaded. "James," she said finally, her voice soft with sorrow, "I'm so sorry you had to go through that. But I'm not surprised." My grip tightened on the phone. "Not surprised." That spark in my chest flared brighter, a hypothesis forming. Sophia had always been meticulous, a planner who saw every angle. Could she have seen this coming? Could she have left me unprotected? It didn't add up. Laura's tone shifted, becoming the crisp voice of a lawyer with a duty to fulfill. "James, I need to tell you something. Sophia bound me to secrecy until specific conditions were met. By throwing you out, Ethan triggered those conditions." My breath caught. "What are you saying?" I asked, though a part of me already knew. "I'm saying," Laura continued, "that the will we read wasn't the whole story. It was true legally, but incomplete. Think of it as the opening move in a game Sophia knew she might not be here to finish." A memory flooded back, so vivid it pulled me out of that dingy motel room. 3 months before she passed, Sophia and I were in the lab, surrounded by her notebooks and humming machines. She'd been quiet that night, her eyes tired but sharp, staring at a stack of legal papers on her desk. "Dad," she'd said, her voice low, "if anything happens to me, trust what I've built. Not just the company, the system." I'd thought she meant her patents, her research. I'd put a hand on her shoulder, told her I always would. But she'd shaken her head, her eyes distant. "No, Dad, the system to protect you." I hadn't understood then. Now in that motel room, her words were as clear as day. She'd been preparing for this. Laura's voice brought me back. "Sophia was brilliant, James. She didn't just build a company. She built contingencies. She loved Ethan in her way, but she wasn't blind. She saw his patterns, his obsession with wealth, his drift from her values. So she designed a test, a legal and ethical trap. The will we read gave Ethan everything he wanted, but it came with a string attached, a fiduciary duty to protect the Sullivan family's welfare and legacy. That means you, James." The pieces clicked into place. When Ethan threw me out, he didn't just hurt me, he shattered the most critical clause in the will. He proved he cared nothing for Sophia's legacy, for our family. Laura explained that this breach gave her the authority to unseal a codicil, a hidden document Sophia had left in her safe. "It's her true will," Laura said, her voice firm. "It voids the first one entirely." Sophia called it her character test. She wanted to give Ethan a chance to prove her wrong, to choose family over greed. But she planned for the likelihood he'd fail. My heart ached with a mix of grief and pride. Sophia, my brilliant girl, hadn't abandoned me. She'd armed me. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice steady, a fire kindling inside me. Laura's reply was all business. "We follow Sophia's instructions to the letter. We don't confront Ethan. We let him think he's won. He'll try to spend that fortune, to tear down her lab, to erase her legacy. But every door will be locked. I'll use standard legal delays, probate filings, tax assessments, to freeze the estate. He'll grow desperate, and his own arrogance will be his downfall. Trust Sophia's system, James. Trust your daughter." I hung up the phone, the motel room no longer a place of shame, but a command center. The game wasn't over. Sophia had set the board, and now it was my turn to play. For the next few days, I became a ghost. I stayed in that dingy motel room, the hum of the highway outside my window the only sound in my world. I kept my phone off, the screen dark, just like Laura had instructed. "Disappear, James," she'd said. "Let Ethan think he's won. His confidence will be his undoing." So I waited, alone with my thoughts, picturing Sophia's lab, her notebooks, the life we'd built. I wondered what Ethan was doing in that house, with all that money he thought was his. I didn't have to wonder long. Laura's updates, delivered over the motel's crackly landline, painted a picture so vivid, it was like I was watching it unfold. Ethan didn't waste a minute. He threw himself into his new role as a multimillionaire, with a hunger that was almost frantic. Laura's private investigator kept tabs on him, and the details were staggering. He tore through the city's most exclusive boutiques, not shopping but claiming, like a king collecting tribute. He bought watches that cost more than my old house, suits tailored to perfection, shoes that gleamed under the store lights. It wasn't just spending, it was a transformation. He was shedding the skin of the man Sophia had married, wrapping himself in a new identity of wealth and power. He moved on to a car dealership, the kind with glass walls and security tighter than a bank. He didn't browse. He pointed at a sleek silver sports car, its curves gleaming like a trophy, and slapped down a hefty deposit with a flick of his credit card. "The rest will come when the estate clears," he told the salesman, his voice dripping with assurance. "It's just paperwork." But his boldest move was the house. He hired a hotshot interior designer, some guy known for turning homes into sterile showrooms, all glass and chrome. They walked through Sophia's house, Ethan issuing orders like a dictator. The warm oak floors we'd laid together, ripped out for cold marble. The cozy furniture we'd chosen, auctioned off. And the lab, Sophia's sanctuary, the heart of her legacy, he wanted it gutted. Laura's investigator overheard him telling the designer, "That basement's a tomb. All those old machines, those dusty notebooks, tear it down. I want a home theater, something cutting edge." I could almost hear Sophia's voice, her passion for that lab, her late nights spent chasing breakthroughs. He was erasing her piece by piece, and it felt like a knife in my chest. Then came the party. 3 nights after he threw me out, Ethan filled the house with strangers, new friends who appeared the moment the $60 million did. The investigator described it like a scene from a movie. Champagne flowing, a DJ blasting music, Ethan at the center, soaking in the adoration. He stood on the staircase, glass in hand, toasting his new life. Someone asked about me, Sophia's father. Ethan put on a show, his voice heavy with fake sorrow. "Poor James," he said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. He couldn't handle the grief, the legal stuff. "I think he's off in some quiet retirement home, somewhere out of the way. It's better for him, really." I wasn't angry when Laura told me this. I felt a strange, cold calm. He was dancing on Sophia's grave, in a house he thought was his, blind to the trap she'd set. The next morning, Ethan woke up in the master bedroom, probably feeling like the king of the world. He drove Sophia's sleek sedan to a fancy downtown cafe, stopping first at a jewelry store to pick up a diamond-encrusted watch. He ordered an overpriced coffee, flashed his black credit card, the one tied to the estate, and waited for the world to bow to him. But the barista swiped the card, frowned, and swiped again. "I'm sorry, sir," he said, his voice low. "It's been declined." Ethan laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "That's impossible." "Run it again, same result." He tried another card, also tied to the estate. Declined. A woman at a nearby table glanced over, and I can imagine Ethan's face burning, his confidence cracking. He fumbled for cash, paid, and stormed out to his car, his phone already to his ear. He called the bank, his voice sharp with fury. The representative was polite, maddeningly so. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "there's a temporary hold on all estate accounts, standard procedure for probate valuation." Ethan's voice rose. "I'm the sole beneficiary. That's my money. Fix it now." But the answer didn't change. The hold was legal, filed by Laura, the estate's executor. Ethan drove back to the house, his mind racing. His phone rang again. This time, the interior designer, his tone clipped. "Ethan, we've got a problem. My crew was stopped at the house this morning. There's a legal injunction, no alterations allowed. And they're billing me for nothing." "What's going on?" Ethan's world was shrinking, fast. Then the car dealership called. "Mr. Brooks, we need the final payment for the sports car today, or we release it to another buyer. Your deposit's non-refundable, per the contract." That silver car, his symbol of victory, was slipping away. Every pillar of his new life, money, house, status, was crumbling in a single morning. Panic set in, raw and desperate. He had one move left. He dialed Laura's office, his voice a mix of rage and fear. "What's happening?" he shouted. "Why's my money frozen?" "This is my house. You work for me." Laura, as she later told me, listened calmly, letting him rant. When he paused, gasping for breath, she spoke, her voice cool as ice. "Mr. Brooks, everything I've done is standard procedure to protect the estate. It's all perfectly legal." He slammed the phone down, but the walls were closing in. He was trapped, not by chains, but by the very system he thought he'd mastered. Ethan's next move was to find me. He drove to the homes of my old friends, people he'd always dismissed with a smirk. But every door was a dead end. "Sorry, Ethan," they said, their voices polite but firm. "We haven't seen James." The man who'd thrown me out was now the one begging for answers. By the fifth day, his arrogance was gone, burned away by desperation. He had nowhere left to turn but Laura's office. She called me that morning, her voice steady. "James, it's time." "He's ready to listen." I put on my old navy suit, the one I'd worn to Sophia's wedding, and headed to her office. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. I sat in Laura's waiting room, a book on biology in my hands, its pages familiar like an old friend. The door opened, and there was Ethan. He looked nothing like the man who'd thrown me out. His suit was wrinkled, his hair messy, his eyes wide with a fear he couldn't hide. He scanned the room, probably looking for Laura's receptionist, then saw me. His face froze, confusion, shock, then a dawning horror. He realized this wasn't a mistake. It was a plan, and I, the old man he'd tossed aside, was at its heart. "James," he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "I've been looking for you." I was worried. The lie was pathetic, crumbling under the weight of my silence. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My presence was enough, a mirror reflecting his greed, his cruelty, his failure. Laura's office door opened. She stood there, her face calm, her suit as sharp as her resolve. "James, Ethan," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Please join me in the conference room." I closed my book, stood and walked past Ethan. He followed. No longer a king, but a man about to face the truth. We walked into Laura's conference room, the polished mahogany table stretching between us like a battlefield. I sat to Laura's right, Ethan to her left, the distance between us more than just wood. He was rigid, his hands clenched in his lap, trying to hold on to the last scraps of his pride. But his eyes betrayed him, wild, desperate, like a man who just realized the ground beneath him was crumbling. Laura sat at the head of the table, her face a mask of calm authority, a leather folder in front of her. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of what was coming. I felt no anger, only a quiet resolve. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here to carry out Sophia's will. Laura began, her voice steady, cutting through the tension like a blade. Ethan, you're here because you found yourself unable to access the assets of Sophia's estate. This is not an error. It's deliberate. She slid a copy of the will we'd heard a week ago across the table. You'll recall this document named you the primary beneficiary, tasked with upholding the Sullivan family's welfare and legacy. Section 2, paragraph 3, binds you to a fiduciary duty for a 30-day evaluation period. Ethan stared at the paper, his eyes scanning the words like he was seeing them for the first time. Confusion fought with panic on his face. Laura tapped a highlighted clause with her pen. 5 days ago, you violated that duty in the most undeniable way. You forcibly removed James Sullivan, the only other living member of Sophia's immediate family, from the home. You told him, and I quote, "Find a street corner to live on." My own words, thrown back at him in Laura's measured tone, hit like a quiet thunderclap. Ethan flinched, his face draining of color. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. There was no defense, no lie that could outrun the truth. Laura leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. That will wasn't just a document, Ethan. It was a test, a question Sophia needed answered. Were you worthy of her life's work? Were you capable of protecting her family? Your actions gave her the answer. She paused, letting the weight settle. Did you listen to the entire will, Ethan? Did you hear Section 4, Subclause C? The part about the immediate activation of a codicil in the event of a catastrophic breach of fiduciary duty? His eyes widened, a blank mask of horror. He hadn't listened. He'd heard only the $60 million, the house, the power. The rest was just noise to him. Laura reached into her folder and pulled out a single cream-colored envelope, sealed with a wax circle bearing the Sullivan family crest, the one I'd given Sophia when she earned her Ph.D. She placed it on the table, its presence like a quiet earthquake. Ethan stared at it, frozen. This codicil, Laura said, her voice resonating with finality, voids the previous will entirely. This is Sophia's true and final will. She slid a letter opener under the seal, the paper tearing with a sharp rip that echoed in the silent room. Inside was a single sheet, Sophia's neat handwriting unmistakable. My breath caught, a pang of grief and pride mixing in my chest. Laura read aloud, her voice clear and steady. This codicil to the last will and testament of Sophia Sullivan, activated by the authority of my executor, renders all previous versions null and void. My estate is to be transferred immediately into the Sullivan Legacy Trust. The sole trustee and administrator will be my father, James Sullivan. The Trust's mission is to fund the Sophia Sullivan Medical Foundation, dedicated to researching and treating childhood diseases. To my husband, Ethan Brooks, the Trust will provide a monthly stipend of $2,000, contingent on verifiable full-time employment. He may reside rent-free in the guest cottage on the property. Any violation of these terms will terminate all support. The words hung in the air. Ethan's face was ashen, his empire of millions reduced to a modest stipend and a cottage. It wasn't poverty. Sophia wasn't cruel. But it was a life of ordinary work, the kind of life Ethan had married her to escape. He shook his head, a tiny, desperate motion, as if he could will the words away. Then, with a soft gasp, he slumped in his chair, his body folding under the weight of his own choices. The king he'd imagined himself to be was gone, replaced by a man staring at a future he'd built with his own greed. 6 months later, I stood at a podium, the scent of fresh paint and hope filling the air. I was in my old Navy suit, but it didn't feel like armor anymore. It felt like the uniform of a man with a purpose. Before me was a room full of bright-eyed children, the first beneficiaries of the Sophia Sullivan Medical Foundation. I looked out at their faces, their parents' grateful smiles, and I spoke, my voice strong. My name is James Sullivan, and I'm Sophia's father. She wasn't just a scientist or a CEO. She was a dreamer who believed medicine should reach everyone, not just the wealthy. This foundation, this building, is her true legacy. I told them about Sophia, the girl who'd sneak into my classroom to play with microscopes, the young woman who stayed up all night perfecting formulas to save lives. The room buzzed with new computers, medical equipment, and the chatter of kids learning about science. It wasn't about the 60 million. It was about the doors Sophia wanted to open for others. The lab, her sanctuary, was now the heart of the foundation, its shelves still lined with her notebooks, now joined by whiteboards filled with new ideas. As for Ethan, I don't think of him much anymore. He works at a garage downtown, fixing cars, his hands stained with grease. I saw him once, through the window of a coffee shop where I was meeting a foundation donor. He was picking up a to-go order, his shoulders slumped, his face tired but resigned. A customer snapped at him for a wrong order, and I saw a flicker of his old fire, but it faded fast. "Sorry, I'll fix it," he muttered, turning back to the counter. He was living the life Sophia had sentenced him to, not punishment, but consequence. The lab is my office now. I sit there in the evenings after the staff has gone home, at Sophia's old desk. On it is a photo of her, taken on a hike we went on years ago. She's laughing, the sun in her eyes, her whole future ahead of her. I look at it and feel no sorrow, only pride. Sophia's legacy isn't a pile of money. It's the kids who'll grow up healthier because of her work, the families who'll find hope. My job, my honor, is to keep that legacy alive every day. This story isn't about money or revenge. It's about justice, the kind that doesn't shout but moves quietly, with purpose. Sophia didn't just leave me a legacy. She gave me a mission. Her real inheritance wasn't the $60 million. It was the chance to build something lasting, something good, from the ashes of loss. I learned that true strength isn't in fighting back with anger, but in trusting the plan, in holding fast to what matters. Sophia's plan wasn't about punishing Ethan. It was about protecting what she loved, her family, her dreams, her belief that one person's success could lift others up. I found my purpose in her foundation, in those kids' smiles, in the hum of her lab now buzzing with new hope. Justice, I've realized, is often silent, a steady hand turning the wheel of truth. If you've ever faced loss or betrayal and found strength in patience, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Like this video and subscribe if you believe in the power of legacy over greed. Thank you for listening. It's an honor to share this journey with you.